Hey, Nicole Roberts-Jones here, and welcome back to part 3 of this special series where I'm walking you through the 56 lessons I've learned around meaningful work in my life. And I hope that you're having some great takeaways. Yes, this is part 3. And by the way, this is also season finale for our first season. So out of the gate, I'm going to ask you to do a couple things. If you're new, great. Tell me hi and write in the comments. This is my first time. If you've watched throughout the season, I want to know what your favorite episodes were. But before I get into that, let's make sure I walk you through the final 18 steps, because this is part 3. 18 lessons, I should say, in meaningful work. So with that, let me do a quick review. Now, let me encourage you, if you haven't watched the previous episodes, you can go and watch them. And I'm always going to encourage you, those of you that are listening on an audio, your favorite audio, Spotify, Apple podcast, wherever it may be. I'm going to always encourage you to come on over to YouTube when I am not interviewing someone. Why? Because I'm always going to do slides. So my YouTube channel is NRJ Network. If you haven't figured that out, NRJ are my initials, nrjnetwork.com. So to encapsulate all 56 lessons, as I shared with you in part 1, I broke it into 8 chapters. So quick review, part 1 and 2, we walk through the first 6 chapters. We'll walk through the final 2 here. So the first 6 chapters encompassed purpose, money. 3 was work transitions. And so many of us are going through that now. 5 was health, and 6 relationships. So again, I'm encourage you to go back and watch it if you missed any of those episodes. All right. So let's dig in and start with our final 2 chapters for this series. The first one is stress management. And some of you guys are saying, well, how come, work and stress management and work transitions were different? Because you could be stressed and have the job that you've always dreamed of, but you need strategy. You could be stressed because you don't realize that you don't like your job, and it could be anywhere in between. And so the lessons that I've learned are going to really encapsulate that, right? So lesson number 38 that I learned is be here now. Now, by the way, this is one of my Equalize Your Life strategies that I talk about in Work Life Hacks. It's a 2-part series. Again, in the show notes below, you can go and watch the entire episode because I teach on the entire Work Life Hacks. And I don't know why my allergies are acting up. Give me 1 second. Let me clear my throat. Okay, and I'm back. So with that said, listen, I remember a time in my own life where I would be at work and then remember all the things I forgot to do at home. I'd be at home and forget about the emails I didn't reply to, or the meetings I needed to set up, or what have you. And it could be it's usually when I'm at the table for dinner with my husband. So what I had to learn is how to be fully where I am now, fully and completely. Because when I'm not, that means part of me is not present. And I love my husband can always tell when I'm not present. What are you thinking about? So when I release that, usually what I do is I pull out my phone. I say, let me just write a note real quick. I write a note to myself to do whatever it is tomorrow or later. And then I can release it and let it go. Because listen, they call today, this moment, the present. Today is a gift. This moment we're in is a gift. It's a present. It's the present. So if you're not here in this moment, you miss so many things that are going by you because you've got so many other things on your mind, right? The second lesson I've learned, really, which has helped me manage my stress, is to release baggage. Now, listen, have you ever realized or thought about the fact that they make you weigh your bags before you get on a plane? Why do you think they do that? Because if a plane is too heavy, it will crash. By the way, that's what happened with singer Aaliyah. Her plane was too heavy. If you remember that back, I think that was in the 90s or it might have been early 2000s. Her plane was too heavy when she passed. So that's why she had a plane crash. So in life, when you are carrying too many things, the bad breakup that happened, maybe the promotion you got overlooked for, and all these things continue to happen to you, and that's a part of life be lifing. But if you don't stop to release it, to work through what you're feeling, I talked about this last episode, you can be bitter or blessed. You can't be both. You can't be blessed and bitter. Don't go together. So you've got to learn to release what happened or work through it so that you can release it, so that you can let go of it. I talked about that last episode as well. One of my biggest lessons was to learn to release the things that could weigh me down. and I stay stuck on yesterday so I can move into my breathtaking future, right? Can't do nothing about yesterday except learn a lesson and move on from it. Number 40 is, speaking of moving on from it, find the gifts that come wrapped in difficulty. I believe that God allows us to go through difficult things to grow us so we learn. I remember reading a quote once that said, life's adversities are God's universities. That's how God grows us. So if you can find the gift or find the lesson that comes in a difficulty, then you become a better person. Great example of this, and I didn't write this on a slide, is Joseph's story. Joseph in the Bible, and you can find Joseph in Genesis 37 through 50. I'm going to give you the Cliff Note version. Now, those of you that don't know Joseph's story, I apologize because it's a fast one. But again, go read it. Genesis 37, chapter 37 through chapter 50. So Joseph and his amazing Technicolor dream coat was his father's favorite. That's why his father gave him that coat. And so to make a long story short, his brothers were hating on him. Haters, right? And so Joseph had a dream one night. Joseph had a dream, a vision, a prophecy that he was going to rise up and I don't remember if it said Lord over his brothers, but he was going to be the boss over his brothers. He was going to be the boss over his brothers, meaning that his brothers were going to have to rely on him and he was going to help them. And they didn't like that. They were already hating on him. So they planned to kill him. I'm trying to make this long story short, y'all. They planned to kill him. Now, remember, God gave him a vision that he would come to be second in command of the country and he would feed his family. His brothers would have to come to him for help or whatever way he told his brothers. Go read it so you get the exact story. But here's what I want you to get. Brothers had on him. They plot to kill him. It was he had 7 brothers. It was 8 boys total. And so they gave 2 of them the assignment and they couldn't do it. So what they did was they put him down in a well and thought he'll die down there surely because he won't have food. Well, some Egyptians come by and they think, actually, let's just sell him to the Egyptians. So they sell him as a slave to the Egyptians. And the brothers believe he's dead and they go on and have their lives. And in Egypt, Joseph rises to second in command. So he's starting to think, okay, great. My vision is coming to pass. But it doesn't, because a king's wife tries to, throws a pass at him. And he's like, I'm not messing up my job, girl. Bye. And she gets mad at him and lies and tells her husband that Joseph tried to rape her. Joseph gets thrown in jail. I'm sharing all that with you because listen, up to that point, I know Joseph, if I were Joseph, let me say it this way, I would be like, okay, God has forgotten about me. This little vision thing, maybe I was seeing things. Maybe I misunderstood the dream. Maybe that's not what's going to happen to me. Well, in the jail, Joseph meets 2 other jailers and he interprets their dreams. When one jailer gets out and the king has dreams, the jailer says to the king, listen, I know who can interpret your dreams. So the king goes to Joseph, and I'm making a long story short, you guys, the story is much longer than this. And Joseph interprets his dreams. The king then makes Joseph the second in command. But look at all the things that Joseph went through before he got to that place. And yes, his brothers then have to go to him. His brothers don't even realize it's him because they think he's dead. And they have to go to him to ask for help because there's a famine in the land. So basically, his story came to pass. Genesis 50:20, Joseph says, what you did, you meant for evil, but God meant it for good. And again, that was a gift that came wrapped in difficulty. See, I think sometimes we think when God gives us a vision or we know our purpose is going to happen overnight, and that's not real. So the way you manage your stress is to realize that in everything, there's something to be learned and to take the time to learn the lesson. To do that, you also have to do number 41, take your emotional pulse. I think sometimes, especially as Black women, dare I say, I call it slave mentality, where we're ingrained to just keep it moving. You're going through something, but just keep pushing. And sometimes you need to stop and just check in with yourself, check in with how you're feeling and process your emotions so that you can either move past them or get help to move past them or process them, again, to release the baggage and to really sometimes just understand what's coming up for you. Sometimes when you can sit with what's coming up for you, you can begin to realize the next thing I'm going to tell you is going to really help you. But before I say this, And I forgot to bring my prop in here with me, but y'all will know what this is when I show you. I want you to understand that when you just keep moving and you don't stop long enough to check in with yourself and say to yourself, what's coming up for me right now? Like, why am I feeling so emotional today? So here's a true story. And I don't think I've ever said this to anybody out loud except for my good girlfriends. I remember my birthday in 2014. I was depressed all day and I couldn't understand why I was depressed. I mean, crying, and I'm not a crier. I'm not somebody that's depressed. I'm always happy, right? So I couldn't understand why I was so depressed. And I kept saying, God, what is it? Had a great long conversation with my dad. And let me tell you, my father was an alcoholic and he was sober that day. And we had a great conversation. And I was just, everything was happening so great. But yet in my spirit, I felt so depressed. So I kept sitting with God, what is this? What are you trying to tell me? My father died the next day, y'all. And I realized that my spirit was heavy because it was the last time I would ever talk to my dad. But we had such a great conversation. He told me to tell my husband, thank you. He talked to Daryl. We had a phenomenal conversation. And I realized in that moment, when I feel that, God is trying to tell me something, that specific feeling. And I've felt that feeling at other times, and it wasn't death other times. But it's so important that you just check in with yourself to connect with. Sometimes God is trying to tell you something. I call a gut, God uttering time out. When your gut you had this gut feeling, I think God is trying to tell you to sit down and let me tell you something. God is trying to tell you something. Remember that song from Color Purple? Yeah. So with that, this is in alignment with number 42, Q-tip. And what Q-tip means is quit taking it personal. So listen, those of you that take things personal, I did bring my Q-tip in here. Those of you that take things personal, I want you to get a Q-tip. Y'all see my Q-tip? And I want you to put it in places that you take things personal. If you're having a hard time at work and you take things personal, I need you to put it at your desk. If you have a hard time at work and maybe where you're driving to work, you put a Q-tip on your dashboard. If you're going through something on a personal note, wherever you have that relationship and conversations, put that Q-tip there. Listen, the Q-tip is to remind you to quit taking it personal. See, sometimes we have an emotional reaction to something that's not based on an emotion. And when we have a negative emotional reaction, then whatever happens after that is going to be negative. Case in point, if my husband says something that makes me angry, I'm not going to say something nice after. So what I do is I quit taking it personal and I hush. I realize that let me stop. Let me check in with my emotions and let me realize the reaction I want to have. And the reason I do that, you all, is because you can't take back your emotion. You cannot. Once it's out there, it's out there. And I'm going to tell you, when a negative emotion starts, it's like I can't even try to catch it back. It's like a train that's off the track, right? There's a book that I'm reading by Mel Robbins called So Let Them. And this is perfect here. And I'm not going to go into the whole theory. Read the book if you have a problem with taking things personal. But what she says is, so let them. If somebody does something and it's bothering you, so let them. But then you have to also say to yourself, so let me. So when I'm taking it personal, I have to stop and realize, what part am I playing in this moment? Did I say something that triggered that person? Is there some way that I'm being that enabled that activity that made me feel that to take it personal? And if it is something that I did or said or some way I'm being, I get to shift that. In alignment with this conversation is number 43, stop giving away your remote. Now listen, y'all. This is a bad example of a remote, but this is my clicker from my PowerPoint slides, right? But you guys know what a remote control is for a TV. It turns the TV off, it turns the TV on, it turns the audio up, it turns the audio down. See, many of you, when you are emotional and you're letting other people dictate the emotions that you feel because you're taking it personal, or because you're not stopping long enough to take your emotional pulse, you're not realizing that you are allowing that situation to dictate how you feel. So case in point, one of my team members, not going to say people's names, has a student that is just irate. And she takes it personal and she goes tit for tat. And I said, don't do that. You're giving him your remote. You're letting him dictate how you feel. Instead, when they go low, we go high. rise above it, stop, take your emotional pulse, because what's happening is what that person's doing is sucking your emotions into the situation and making you feel angry, frustrated, upset, all those things. But you gave that person permission when you replied to it. Doesn't mean it's okay. But when you sit long enough to take back your remote and say, how do I want the resolution to happen in this moment? And who do I need to be to resolve it? That same student that she was having a hard time with sent an irate, crazy email to me too. And I listen, first mind is to go off too. I'm gonna be honest, but I did not. I took my emotional pulse. I sat with it for about an hour. And I said to the student, I am so happy to support you. I understand you're frustrated. Let's set a time to meet. I didn't give him my remote. I didn't go tit for tat in what he said. Because again, you've got to realize you have the power at any given moment to dictate how your day shall be, regardless of how other people are being. How are you in that moment? Taking back your remote. How are you in that moment? Taking that Q-tip and quit taking it personal. How are you in that moment taking your emotional pulse so that you don't let things get the best of you, right? I kind of said number 43, the power of choice. In every given situation, you have the power to choose. You do. The question is, are you exercising your power? Number 45, I deserve it. I had to start to say to myself when I was going through bad relationships, and my first mind would be to go into why did he do this, and oh my goodness, and oh, I deserve a love, not that. As a matter of fact, I used to have to say to myself, that is not God, because God would never bless me with that mess. And I know I deserve it. This is a conversation in favor. If you know that you are favored, if you are blessed and highly favored, then you know you deserve it all. You don't have to compromise. You don't have to settle. And this goes along with when people are talking to you crazy. I don't deserve that. But you've got to make a different choice to not feed into that. All of this helps you manage your stress, y'all. I can't tell you enough, right? Then the other thing I had to learn, number 46, is to feed myself a better mental diet. So listen, if you're watching, I had to stop watching some. Listen, let me out myself. I love every reality show, all of them, every one of them. So if you say, do you watch this show? I probably will say yes. But I had to stop watching Love and Hip Hop because it got so bad. And some of the Housewife franchises, I can't watch anymore because it's gotten so bad. Because I realized what I consume comes out of me. As I can't think of her name right now on Atlanta Housewives would say, who's going to check me, boo? I needed to check my own self and look at what I'm pouring into myself. I'm going to talk to you about spiritual in a second. But I began to realize if I could pour more positive into myself, if I could look at all the people that are around you too, this is why you got to make sure the people that are around you are giving deposits. And I talked about this in our relationship series, relationship currency. If you missed that, go listen to it. Because if they're withdrawing, and they never make a deposit, then you're living in deficit. Just like, would you ever feed yourself a rotten piece of bread? Like if it was moldy, would you eat it? Or if you bought a steak at the grocery store and it was expired and it had like mold on it, would you eat it? So then why do you feed yourself things that you know are not going to produce positive? Now, I will say to you, I had this great conversation with one of my good girlfriends that even though I do love me some reality shows and stuff like that, I make sure I add better into my diet by having my next section. We're going to start talking to you about spirituality. So I'll talk to you about that in a second. But let me tell you this last one, which is it's just one of my favorite lessons I learned. Stop the story in your head. You got to stop telling yourself these stories that you're not good enough, right? That you'll never get the raise, that, oh, who am I to do this? If you realize that you deserve it and you understand who you are, this stops the stress. Like, there have been times that I've been overlooked for a promotion and I had to say to myself, well, that's obviously not meant to be for me. And then if I stop and look at all the things that I can learn in that moment, I stop telling my stories of not being smart enough to get it. Or all the jobs I got looked over after I got my degree and my certification, my career service, certified career service provider certification. And all my years of being an adjunct professor, teaching and field education and all the things I have done on a university level, in addition to as a career development coach and leadership development coach and all the things I've done in 30 years. And I kept getting looked over and over. See, the story in my head could have been, matter of fact, I was up for a huge role at a university. And my brother-in-law sits on the board of that university. So I was like, oh, I'm going to get this because I met the chancellor. Yeah, I didn't get that. You know why? What's interesting is I got the job that is literally 5 minutes. The school is 5 minutes from that school, and it's a much bigger role. But had I got in my head and started to tell myself that I wasn't good enough because I didn't get that role with all the connections, that obviously was not the role for me. And that was at a predominantly white institution. Nothing wrong with that. When I really knew I wanted to work at HBCU in my heart and my soul, and God knew it too. And hello. So you got to stop telling yourself the story, because what happens is you begin to believe the story you're telling yourself. Again, I talked about this in greater detail and gave you strategy in my work-life balance hacks 2-part series. So go and watch it, right? But here's the thing I began to learn. That not good enough talk becomes like a Verizon network in your head, right? And you know how when you're in a bad area and you got to say, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Well, when you're telling yourself that story, it becomes that bad network, and the good can't get through after a while. So you've got to really, really take some time when you're managing your stress, is to look at your emotional pulse, y'all. That's all roads are going to lead back to that then lead into the other steps I just walked you through. All right. So our final chapter, which is my favorite, is spirituality. Of course it is, right? So principle here is the be, do, have principle. Now, this is something I taught to my clients for years, and I probably have talked about this on episode after episode, but here's the thing that I know. They call us human beings, but we're not. We're human doings, because we focus on what do I need to do, what I need to do, what do I need to do? So much so that we leave out our being. And God is not showing up in your busy. He's just not. He's going to let you be busy, be busy, be busy. And he's going to sit and wait for you to sit in quiet contemplation so that he can speak to your soul. So I had to find being time in every single day so that I can be in the presence of God and he can speak to my soul, which means I have to, number 49, cultivate Jesus time, which gets hard when you're busy. I'm going to be honest. There's some days that I'm talking to Jesus driving down the street, right? Because maybe I don't get a quiet moment that day because I have to be at a meeting and I got to drive through traffic. But here's the thing you have to understand. When you are growing in your relationship, if I call my husband from the car, he doesn't discount that we had a conversation. No more than God is going to discount you having a conversation while you're in the shower, while you're driving your car, just as long as it's you and him and you're having that time. You're having that time to read and learn and study and grow. How do you grow a relationship if you don't spend time? The next thing I had to learn in my own spiritual journey is the power of silence, of being able to sit in quiet contemplation. Now, listen, all those things I just told you, I learned when I learned this Bible verse, for such a time as this, which is taken from Esther, the 4th chapter. Now, listen, the thing that's interesting about Esther in the Bible, there's only 2 women that have books named for them, Esther and Ruth. That's it. There's other women in the Bible, but only 2 have books named after them. So that means that Esther is significant. So I want you to really hone in on some of these lessons that Esther can teach you. Now, by the way, those of you that have been around me for a while, you know Esther is my favorite girl. I talk about her a lot because I really feel like my shift in starting to do this work was for such a time as this moment, right? So this is taken from, I'm going to read Esther 4, 13 through 14. Now, again, read all of Esther chapter 4. Well, to get an idea of Esther's story and how she gets to this moment. And let me just say this before I read this Bible verse. Let me give you a little background on Esther. Esther is a Jew that becomes queen. First of all, Jew could never become queen. But what happened is her uncle Mordecai worked in the palace and overheard, the king is looking for a queen. Let me give you a quick version, y'all. And so he changed her name from Hadassah to Esther so she could run. So pretty much like The Bachelor, women came from all over to run to be queen, and Esther won. So over time, she's being in the palace, having all her servants, having people feed her and bathe her and clothe her and all the phenomenal things that queens did back then. And Mordecai overhears the king's right-hand man, Haman, has a plot to kill the Jews. Problem is, the king doesn't know his wife is a Jew, right? So here's what Mordecai says back to her when he hears that and he tells her that, anyway, it's Esther 4:13 through 14. Let me read this, trying to paraphrase it. And Mordecai told them to answer to Esther. So he writes her a letter because he can't be seen talking to her because, they will find out. So he sends her a note. This is the note. Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet, who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? I realized that I was born in South Central LA, went through all the things I went through, bad breakups, living through drive-by shootings, all the things, but yet still had a bachelor's degree, master's degree, started a six-figure business. All of those things were for such a time as this. I learned so many things and went through so many things and grew through so many things. And every single one of those things I use in my daily work. And I wonder if you realize that you've had it for such a time as this moment. The next lesson that I learned from Esther and my spirituality is you've got to ask for help when you need it. The thing that Esther says next to Mordecai, after he says, yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? And Esther 4:15, here's what she says back. That Esther told them to reply to Mordecai. Now, again, they're writing letters back and forth. Go gather all the Jews who are present and fast for me, neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So I want you to get this. That was 15 and 16, y'all, actually 4, 15 and 16. She didn't do it alone. Sometimes when God is asking us for something, you might need to ask for people to join you in prayer. Or sometimes you might need to just say, can I run something past you? Not because you want their opinion, but because you want their solidarity so that you don't have to go through something so hard by yourself. I know one of the greatest things that I've learned is how to ask for help. It doesn't make you any less powerful. Matter of fact, I think it makes you more powerful when you ask for the help that you need. Mm-hmm. The next thing I believe that Esther's story teaches us is that we've got to ask for wisdom. Matter of fact, the book of Proverbs is a whole book of wisdom. And one of the greatest kings was great because he was wise. King David. And you learn and hear God talk about that. Next thing I had to learn from Esther, but also because she goes on and fasts and prays, and then God gives her instructions specifically to do certain things. You have to learn to trust God's timing. You might think that you are meant to get this thing that you're meant to get, and you're meant to get it this year. But what if it takes 5 more years? Look at Joseph's story that I told you earlier. It took him, I believe it says 13 years before he got to that, or was it 30? Can't remember, but it was a long time. Esther, first, she arose in her spirit to throw a dinner party for her king. So she did it. She threw with one night, second night, third night. I know she didn't have a 3-night strategy up front. That happened organically when she was in the current place. So when she was in the first dinner, she thought, okay, I think I need to do another one. So she threw another dinner. She's at the second dinner and she thought, I think I need to do another one. And then at that third dinner, she felt, okay, it's time for me to ask a question. The king said, whatever you go ask me, I'm going to give you. So those of you that wonder how her story ended, she told the king she was a Jew, and then Haman was trying to kill her people. So guess who died? Haman did, and not her. And she remained queen. But she had to trust God's timing, because had she done it the wrong way, or she did it too quickly, she would have died. 55, never compromise who you are for anything. See, Esther teaches us that she could have compromised and not told she was a Jew. But the saying, and I can't remember where I heard this saying, and I'm sure some of you have heard this saying too, what gets done in the dark will come to the light. At some point, the king would have found out and she would have died. You should never have to compromise who you are for a job or to be in a relationship, or I can go on and on. Neither did Esther. When the time came, for such a time as this moment, what did she say? If I perish, I perish. She did not compromise. And my last lesson, something that if you've been around me, you've heard me say this all the time, because this is one of the greatest things I've learned. Number 56. And I had to zoom all the way in on this one. Because again, if you've been around me, you have heard me say this before. Your comfort and your conviction can never coexist. You can't expect back to go after your next best move, your breathtaking future, and do it in comfort. Look at Joseph's story we talked about, and Esther's story, and actually anybody that was greatly used by God, they had to do it and be uncomfortable. What I have learned in my journey is the greatest things happen outside of your comfort zone. So if you're fighting for comfort, you're fighting for it to be easy, you're fighting to do it and not be afraid. I'm going to tell you right now, that means you're trying to do it comfortable. Matter of fact, I know that anytime I get really, really comfortable in my career is when God does something to matriculate me to my next level, which is how this podcast started in the first place. So again, one of my absolute favorite, because this is one of the best lessons I've learned, and I continue to learn it over and over again, is your comfort and your conviction can never coexist. Is that you've got to be willing to grow your courage in the middle of doing it. And you cannot let your conviction go away because maybe you're afraid to do it. Matter of fact, I feel like, and I said this in another episode, like Ayala Van Zant said, if you're not feel like you need to pee on yourself, you're not playing big enough. So I've learned in my own journey that if I'm going to grow into the woman God has created me to be, I've got to do it afraid and allow my courage to grow as I'm growing and living out my conviction. So that's all 56 lessons, y'all. All 56 lessons in meaningful work that I've learned along the way. This first season has been my honor and my privilege to pour into you. So whether this is your first episode or whether this is your first series, I want to thank you for joining me for this Meaningful Work podcast. Now, those of you that know me, you know at the end of every year, I sit in quiet contemplation and ask God my direction for next year. And so I'll be asking him for direction for this podcast. I'll be asking him for insight. But I also want to hear from you so that I can pray over your questions, things you're challenged with at work, things you're challenged with in relationships, all those pieces of you. So listen, so many people focus on work, which work does take up 80% of our lives. But who you are, you bring to your job every day. So if we don't talk about relationships, we don't talk about health, we don't talk about spirituality, I can go on, then you're dissipating what you're bringing into the role you play at your 9 to 5. And so whatever major things you're going through, I want to encourage you to send me an email. Email me at info@NicoleRobertsJones.com. Write podcast topic for 2026 and tell me the things that are burning in your soul that you need support with. And if you don't want me to out you, say, and don't out me. No problem, I won't. Because you just say, I want to thank so-and-so for this topic, right? Matter of fact, I was at a luncheon about a month ago. 2 months ago, actually. And one of my good girlfriends pulled me to the side. Okay, girl, I got some ideas. I wrote every single one of those ideas down, and those will be podcast topics for next year. So in addition to, I'll be praying over them and if God so leads, but I'm sure he will, right? So I want to encourage you to do the same thing. info@NicoleRobertsJones.com. It's my honor and privilege to have served you all year with a Meaningful Work podcast. I look forward to season 2. And don't worry, I'll be playing some replays and some reruns, but I'm going to encourage you. Go back through the areas that you know you need the most support in. Wherever you have on that wheel of life, if you did that work from work-life balance hacks, whatever your lowest areas are, I want to encourage you to spend some time. And then if you have questions on those, please send me an email so I can support you so that we grow. Listen, when you grow, I grow. When I grow, you grow, because every lesson I learn, I teach. All right. So with that, it's my honor, my privilege. I've said that how many times, and I'll see you next season. Oh, and by the way, you know what I'm going to say? Share this episode because somebody else can benefit and tell me your takeaways. All right, y'all. And I'll see you next season. Bye, y'all.